Welcome, my friends. My name is Joy. Let's prepare for sleep. Close your eyes gently. Notice how your breath slows, like the wind settling across a quiet lake. Tonight, we wander not into fairy tales, but into something even more mysterious: the hidden corners of the human mind, where thoughts are planted and choices aren't always your own. These are the darkest tricks of psychology. Not to frighten you, but to understand them, to see how they work and why they work, and maybe to free yourself from their quiet grip. So breathe in deeply, and let's begin. What happens if someone keeps telling you that you're insane? At first, you'd reject it. You know who you are. You trust your own mind. But over time, something shifts. Maybe you are a difficult person. Maybe you do overreact. Maybe you're not as rational as you thought. And if enough doubt creeps in, you might start believing the one thing you never thought possible. Maybe they're right. This is gaslighting, a psychological weapon designed to make you question your own perception of reality. It's not just lying. It's erasing truth itself and replacing it with something more convenient for the manipulator. And the worst part? By the time you realize what's happening, if you ever do, you're already trapped. The term comes from a 1944 film, Gaslight, where a husband slowly convinces his wife that she's losing her mind. He dims the lights in their home, then denies that anything has changed when she notices. The goal? To make her doubt herself so completely that she becomes dependent on him. But this isn't just a movie trope. It's a real-world manipulation tactic, used in toxic relationships, cults, politics, and even corporations. Gaslighting works because it destabilizes reality itself. It starts subtly. The manipulator denies things they've said or done, even when there's proof. I never said that. You're making things up. At first, you argue back. But over time, hearing the same denials over and over chips away at your confidence. Next, they attack your ability to think clearly. You're always so dramatic. You overanalyze everything. Soon, you start doubting your own judgment, convincing yourself that maybe you are the problem. Then comes emotional manipulation. Any reaction you have is dismissed. Why are you so sensitive? You always blow things out of proportion. The goal is to make you question your right to feel the way you do. Eventually, you start second-guessing your own emotions, apologizing when you shouldn't. And then, the final step, isolation. Gaslighters don't want you hearing outside perspectives, so they slowly cut you off from other influences. They tell you your friends are making you paranoid, that your family doesn't really understand you. Bit by bit, they become the sole authority on what's real. At this stage, they don't need to manipulate you anymore. You do it to yourself. You stop questioning them. You silence your own doubts before they even have a chance to surface. You accept their version of events, not because you want to, but because your mind no longer trusts itself to disagree. Gaslighting is terrifying because it doesn't just manipulate your thoughts. it rewrites who you are. It makes you abandon yourself, handing over control to someone else without even realizing it. And by the time you finally see the truth, if you ever do, it feels impossible to break free. Because how do you fight back when you don't even know what's real anymore? Sometimes, the manipulation doesn't begin with confusion or cruelty. It starts with love, or at least what feels like love. At first, it feels like something out of a movie. The attention is intoxicating. The affection is overwhelming. You finally found someone who sees you, really sees you. They flood you with compliments, send constant texts, tell you you're special, that they've never met anyone like you. It's intense, exhilarating, almost too perfect. And that's because island. This is love bombing, a psychological trick designed to make someone emotionally dependent before pulling the rug out from under them. It's not about genuine affection. It's a setup, a carefully crafted illusion. Love bombing hijacks the brain's reward system. When someone floods you with extreme positivity, your brain releases dopamine, the same chemical involved in addiction. It's a high, an emotional rush that feels impossible to walk away from. And that's the point. In relationships, it might look like extravagant gifts, rushing intimacy, or declarations of love after just days. In friendships or workplaces, it's instant connection, relentless praise, flattery that feels unreal. But the trick isn't in the excess, it's in the reversal. Because once the victim is hooked, the withdrawal begins. The good morning texts stop. The warmth fades. The compliments turn into cold indifference. Or worse, criticism. Suddenly, the person who made you feel so special pulls away. And you're left scrambling, wondering what went wrong. Here's where the real manipulation begins. Instead of recognizing the pattern, the victim blames themselves. They analyze every conversation, lower their boundaries, work harder to fix what they think they ruined. They chase the affection, not realizing the honeymoon phase was never real. This cycle, intense affection followed by emotional starvation, is a trap. It's called intermittent reinforcement. The same psychological mechanism that makes gambling addictive. The victim never knows when the affection will return. So they keep chasing it, tolerating worse and worse treatment for just one more hit of that early euphoria. It's used by narcissists in love, by cult leaders to keep followers obedient, even by toxic employers to manipulate loyalty. The unpredictability creates a roller coaster, and the victim, focused on regaining the high, doesn't realize how much control they've lost. There's a way to control someone without force, without threats, without a single raised voice. You don't have to argue, persuade, or command. All you have to do is make them feel guilty. Guilt-tripping and shame inducement are among the most powerful psychological weapons. They can turn people into puppets without them ever realizing it. The victim believes they're acting freely. But in reality, Their emotions are being pulled like strings. Think about it. How many times have you done something not because you wanted to, but because you felt bad if you didn't? Maybe you agreed to a favor while exhausted. Maybe you apologized for something that wasn't your fault. Maybe you stayed in a toxic relationship because leaving made you feel like a terrible person. That's guilt tripping in action, and it's terrifyingly effective. The trick is simple. First, the manipulator plants the seed of guilt, subtly twisting reality. A parent sighs, "After everything I've done for you, this is how you treat me?" A friend says, "I guess I just don't matter to you anymore." A partner whispers, "I sacrificed so much for this relationship, and you're just going to walk away?" None of these statements directly tell the victim what to do. They don't have to. The guilt does all the work. But guilt alone isn't always enough. That's where shame comes in. Guilt makes you feel bad about something you did. Shame makes you feel bad about who you are. When someone internalizes shame, they stop fighting back. They don't just feel like they did something wrong. They feel like they are wrong. And that's the ultimate form of control. Cult leaders, abusive partners, manipulative bosses, they all use this tactic to break people down, to make them easier to control. If you can convince someone that they're flawed, that they owe you, that they're never quite enough, they'll try forever to prove otherwise. They'll stay in situations they should leave, agree to things they don't want, chase approval that will never be truly given. And here's the scariest part. Guilt tripping doesn't just come from others. We learn to do it to ourselves. We hear those voices so often, they become part of our own inner dialogue. I shouldn't say no. I should be better. I don't deserve to be happy. Once someone starts shaming themselves, the manipulation is complete. They no longer need anyone else to control them. In 1973, Patty Hearst, a wealthy heiress, was kidnapped by a militant group called the Symbionese Liberation Army. At first, she resisted. She was beaten, locked in a dark closet, and isolated for weeks. But then something terrifying happened. Months later, she was seen holding a gun, robbing a bank alongside her captors. The world was stunned. How does someone go from victim to willing participant? This wasn't just a hostage situation. It was a textbook case of psychological breakdown. It starts with breaking a person down. When someone experiences repeated punishment, failure, or isolation, their mind adapts. And in a disturbing way, they stop seeing escape as an option, even when the door is wide open. This isn't just theory. Psychologists discovered it in a study with dogs. They placed the animals in cages with electrified floors. At first, the dogs tried to escape, but after being shocked repeatedly, with no way out, they gave up. And here's the terrifying part. When the cage doors were finally opened, they still didn't leave. They had learned helplessness. This is what makes victims of manipulation stay, even when a way out exists. It begins with unpredictable reward and punishment. One day, the captor is kind. The next, they're cruel. The victim never knows what to expect. Their brain becomes stuck in survival mode, too exhausted to fight back. Then comes self-doubt. The manipulator chips away at their ability to think for themselves. They're told they're weak, foolish, incapable. Confidence erodes to nothing. Eventually, they begin to believe they need their abuser to survive. Next is isolation. Friends, family, outside perspectives, all cut off. Without anyone to remind them of who they were, their world shrinks. Their thoughts become fully controlled. And finally, forced dependence. The victim relies on their abuser for food, shelter, even human connection. By this stage, they don't just accept captivity, they may defend it. Just like Patty Hearst did, they become active participants in their own entrapment. This is why people stay in abusive relationships. Why prisoners of war form emotional bonds with their captors. Why high control groups keep their members submissive. It's not weakness. It's not stupidity. It's survival. The brain prioritizes safety over freedom. And when someone is trained to believe that escape is impossible, they won't even try. There's a moment in every hostage situation where the victim should fear their captor, hate them, fight them, do whatever it takes to escape. But sometimes, something strange happens. Instead of fear comes trust, even loyalty, even love. It sounds impossible, but it's not. The name Stockholm Syndrome comes from a 1973 bank robbery in Sweden. 4 hostages were locked inside a vault for 6 days, terrified, powerless. When the police finally rescued them, something bizarre happened. The hostages defended their captors. One even raised money for their legal defense. The world was baffled. How could victims side with the people who threatened their lives? But this wasn't an isolated case. It happens in kidnappings, cults, abusive relationships, even prisoner of war camps. And the reason why is terrifying. Stockholm Syndrome isn't about weakness. It's about survival. When a person is trapped and powerless, the brain stops looking for ways to fight and starts looking for ways to cope. The captor controls everything: food, movement, even whether they live or die. And in that moment, the mind does something disturbing. It rewires fear into attachment. It starts with small acts of mercy, a meal, an apology, a gesture of safety, and soon the victim begins to see their captor as their savior. Because when someone is both the source of your fear and your comfort, your mind clings to the comfort. Then comes isolation. The victim is cut off from the outside world. Their only human connection is the captor. Over time, their sense of self erodes. They stop questioning. They start justifying. This is why abuse victims often defend their abusers, why hostages sometimes refuse to escape. It's not logical, it's biological. Finally, dependency locks them in place. When their only way to stay safe is to keep their captor happy, they stop resisting and start working for them instead of against them. They might even feel gratitude, loyalty, love. That's what makes Stockholm Syndrome so terrifying. It proves how fragile human perception can be. The mind will betray itself to survive, twisting reality until victims defend their own suffering. What if I told you that some of your memories, the moments you swear happened exactly as you recall, might be completely false? That someone could plant a memory in your mind, and you would believe it just as firmly as your real experiences? It sounds like science fiction, but in reality, memory is one of the most fragile, easily manipulated parts of the human mind. And that makes it the perfect tool for control. Take the infamous Lost in the Mall experiment by psychologist Elizabeth Loftus. Participants were told stories about their childhood, some real, some completely made up. One of the fake stories, they had once been lost in a shopping mall. At first, they had no memory of it. But after repeated questioning and subtle suggestions, many began recalling it in detail: who found them, what the mall looked like, even how they felt. They swore it had happened, even though it never did. Their minds filled in the blanks, constructing a completely false memory. That wasn't misremembering, that was memory being rewritten. You see, our brains don't store memories like a camera. Every time we recall an event, we reconstruct it, pulling together fragments, filling in gaps, and unknowingly changing the details. And the more you recall a memory, the less accurate it becomes. With the right influence, someone can alter your past, and in doing so, reshape your identity. The easiest method is suggestion. A simple phrase like, "Are you sure that's what happened?" Or, "I remember it differently," can introduce doubt. Your brain wants consistency, so it starts adjusting your memory to match the new version. Over time, you adopt the false memory as your own. Then comes reinforcement. If others confirm the false memory, whether they're lying or misremembering, it becomes reality. The brain trusts collective certainty more than personal doubt. If everyone remembers it that way, maybe you're the one who's wrong. And this isn't harmless. False confessions in court have come from memory manipulation. Manipulative partners rewrite history, convincing victims they were the problem. Governments twist public memory, reshaping history to serve their agenda. Memory is the foundation of who we are. But if someone else can change your past, then they can change your future. And by the time you realize your mind has been altered, if you ever do, it's already too late. Fear is the oldest form of control. It overrides logic, crushes independent thought, and turns people into willing followers. When someone is afraid, they don't analyze, they don't question, they just want to feel safe. And that's what makes fear-mongering and anxiety induction one of the most dangerous psychological tricks ever used. History is filled with examples of fear being weaponized to control entire populations. One of the most infamous, the Salem witch trials in the late 1600s. Paranoia gripped an entire town. People believed witches were hiding in plain sight. Neighbors turned against neighbors. Logic disappeared. Accusations spread like wildfire. People confess to crimes they never committed just to avoid execution. And those who didn't confess were sentenced to death anyway. Fear didn't just manipulate them, it made them destroy themselves. And you don't need a witch hunt for this trick to work. It happens in everyday life. A manipulative boss keeps employees terrified of losing their jobs. An abusive partner convinces someone that the outside world is too dangerous to survive alone. Politicians and media outlets use fear constantly, warning that disaster is imminent, that life is under attack, and only they can protect you. The more afraid you are, the more control they have. This works because fear hijacks the brain. When you're anxious, the amygdala, your threat detector, goes into survival mode. Logical thinking shuts down. You become hyper-focused on avoiding danger. And in that state, whoever offers you relief, a leader, a belief, a product, becomes your anchor. This is why fear-based marketing works. Ads don't just sell products, they sell protection. Without this cream, you'll age faster. Without this insurance, you'll lose everything. Without this alarm system, you won't be safe at home. The fear is planted. The solution follows. And the most terrifying part? Fear-driven manipulation doesn't feel like manipulation. It feels like concern, like preparation, like wisdom. But if someone is constantly feeding your fears, keeping you anxious, and offering themselves as the only way out, step back and ask why. Because the moment fear stops being a warning and starts becoming a leash, someone else is holding the other end. This psychological trick is so powerful. It can make people betray their values, stay in toxic relationships, and feel trapped in their own lives. It's not hypnosis. It's not mind control. It's something worse. And the scariest part, most people don't even realize it's happening to them. Picture this. A mother tells her child, "If you leave me and move away, I don't know how I'll survive." A partner says, "If you really loved me, you wouldn't question me." A friend warns, "After everything I've done for you, you owe me." These aren't just guilt trips. They're calculated forms of control. This is emotional blackmail. A psychological manipulation tactic where someone exploits your emotions, fear, guilt, obligation to get what they want. They don't ask. They don't force. They make you feel like saying no would be cruel, selfish, or even dangerous. And before you know it, you're doing things you never wanted to do because saying no feels impossible. And this tactic isn't just used by individuals. Entire groups, even movements, have been built on emotional blackmail. Take organized crime. Mob bosses don't just use threats. They manipulate loyalty, family ties, and unspoken debts. Refusing a favor isn't just rude. It's betrayal. But you don't need the mafia for this to work. It happens everywhere. In relationships where one partner threatens to leave if they don't get their way. In families where one person controls everyone else through outbursts or silence. At work, where employees are made to feel guilty for setting boundaries. And it always follows a pattern. First, the manipulator makes a demand subtle or direct. Next, they trigger guilt, fear, or obligation. Maybe they act hurt. Maybe they explode. Maybe they withdraw affection. Finally, they offer a way out. If you just do what I say, everything will be fine. And just like that, you're trapped. Not because you can't say no, but because it feels like saying no will destroy everything. So, how do you break free? It starts with recognition. If someone makes you feel like your emotions are being used against you, step back. If setting a boundary leads to threats, guilt-tripping, or punishment, you're being manipulated. And the key to breaking free isn't arguing or explaining. It's refusing to play the game. Because emotional blackmailers don't want fairness or love. They want control. And the moment they realize they can't control you anymore, they'll either escalate or move on to their next victim. Everyone has insecurities, small whispers of doubt that creep into the back of the mind. Am I good enough? Do they really like me? What if I fail? Now imagine someone knowing exactly what those insecurities are and using them to control you. This is one of the darkest psychological tricks. Weaponizing your own fears and doubts to manipulate behavior. And it happens everywhere. In relationships, in workplaces, in politics, even in the ads you scroll past every day. One of the most infamous examples, Bernie Madoff's Ponzi scheme. He didn't just steal billions, he exploited fear. He preyed on wealthy investors terrified of missing out, made them feel chosen, part of something elite. And once he had them hooked, he used their greed, self-doubt, and desire for status against them. That's how this trick works. It starts by identifying what you fear most, and then twisting it. A partner subtly makes you feel unattractive, so you crave their validation. A boss hints that you're replaceable, so you overwork yourself to feel secure. A friend reminds you of your past failures, keeping you emotionally small. The goal is dependence. They want you to need their reassurance, their approval, their protection. And here's why it works so well. Insecurities cloud judgment. When you feel like you're not good enough, you second-guess yourself. You try harder to earn love, respect, belonging. And the worst part? They control the supply. They give you just enough validation to keep you hooked, then take it away again. Social media uses the same trick. Algorithms thrive on insecurity, showing you ads that make you feel unattractive, unsuccessful, or like you're falling behind. Influencers curate lives that seem perfect, just to make yours feel dull. Companies create problems you didn't know existed, then sell you the solution. But it's not just corporations. It happens in families, in friendships, in love. A toxic parent reminds their child they'd be nothing without them. A jealous friend downplays your success. A partner chips away at your confidence until you feel lucky just to have them. So how do you fight back? First, recognize the pattern. If someone's words make you feel small, unsure, or like you constantly have to prove yourself, step back. Are they helping you grow, or are they feeding your fears to keep you close? Second, rebuild confidence outside their influence. The stronger your self-worth becomes, the harder it is for someone to use your insecurities against you. Because no one who truly cares about you will ever make you feel small on purpose. Triangulation is a psychological trick, so subtle it can turn even the most confident person into an anxious wreck. It makes people question their worth, their relationships, and even their grip on reality, without them ever realizing it's happening. At its core, triangulation introduces a third person, real or imagined, into a dynamic to create tension, insecurity, and competition. It's a classic move in toxic relationships. A manipulative partner casually mentions how attractive or successful someone else's island. They compare their victim to an ex, implying they don't quite measure up. Sometimes, they even fabricate outside interest just to provoke jealousy. It seems harmless at first, just a comment, just a story. But over time, it changes everything. The victim begins to compete for validation. They feel replaceable. They work harder to prove themselves. They stop asking, "Is this relationship healthy?" and start wondering, "Am I good enough?" Jealousy induction takes it even further. The manipulator doesn't just hint, they actively stir doubt. They flirt in front of their partner. They overly praise someone else. They make sure the victim sees the attention they're supposedly receiving. Each move is calculated to create desperation, a constant craving for reassurance. And this tactic isn't limited to romance. In the workplace, a toxic boss pits employees against each other, favoring one just enough to keep everyone else uneasy. In families, a parent may compare siblings to create rivalry instead of connection. In politics, leaders divide people into factions, turning them against one another to maintain control. Why does it work? Because humans are wired to seek validation. When someone we care about introduces competition, our brain reacts as if survival is at stake. We want to be chosen. We need to feel secure. And in that desperation, we become easy to manipulate. The victim stops questioning the relationship and starts questioning themselves. So how do you stop it? First, recognize the pattern. If someone is constantly making you feel like you're in competition, ask who benefits from that. Second, refuse to play the game. Stop reacting. The moment you stop chasing approval, the manipulator loses control. And finally, rebuild your sense of worth. Because the stronger your self-respect becomes, the harder it is for anyone to use comparison against you. For centuries, public shaming has been one of the most effective tools of control. It can strip a person of their dignity, isolate them from their community, and turn them into a cautionary tale. Whether it's a medieval crowd mocking someone in the stocks or a modern social media mob tearing apart someone's reputation, the psychology behind it remains the same. Public shaming isn't just about punishment. It's about breaking someone so completely they accept their own destruction. One of the most infamous examples, the Salem witch trials. In 1692, innocent people, mostly women, were dragged into the public eye, accused of witchcraft, and forced to confess under pressure. There was no real evidence, only fear, hysteria, and the overwhelming power of public condemnation. Once someone became a target, their fate was sealed. Because when a crowd forms, reason disappears. Why does public humiliation work so well? Because it taps into one of our oldest fears, social rejection. Humans are wired to survive in groups. To be cast out meant danger. In ancient times, exile could be a death sentence. Today, the body reacts to shame the same way it reacts to physical pain. And while modern society may not throw people out of villages, social media can exile them with a few thousand clicks. It doesn't just happen on a grand scale. It happens in workplaces, where a boss ridicules an employee in front of others. In classrooms, where a student is shamed for making a mistake. In relationships, where one partner humiliates the other in public. It's a power move, designed to make the victim feel small, weak, and dependent on the person or group that shamed them. And here's where the trap deepens. After the humiliation, many victims seek approval from their abuser. Instead of fighting back, they try to regain acceptance, which makes them even easier to control. Now, social media has taken public shaming to a new level. One mistake, one post, and thousands of strangers become judges, juries, executioners. The bigger the crowd, the less anyone feels responsible. And once you've been branded as bad, the internet rarely forgives. But public shaming isn't just used to destroy individuals. It's used to control everyone else. When someone is humiliated in front of others, it sends a warning. Step out of line, and this could be you. It enforces norms not because they're right, but because the fear of humiliation is stronger than the will to resist. So how do you protect yourself? Recognize its purpose. It's not always about truth or justice. It's about fear. The moment you understand that, the power of shame begins to fade. Because public humiliation relies on one thing, your belief that you deserve it. And the moment you stop believing that, the spell is broken. People will defend something even when it's wrong, even when it hurts them, even when reality is screaming at them to stop. But this isn't just stubbornness. It's a psychological trap. A mental battlefield where, without even realizing it, you're forced to justify your own suffering. This is cognitive dissonance amplification, one of the most dangerous manipulation tactics, designed to make people double down instead of walk away. Cognitive dissonance happens when someone holds two conflicting beliefs at the same time. It creates an unbearable tension in the mind, a deep, unsettling discomfort that we are hardwired to resolve. Imagine being loyal to a leader, a relationship, or an ideology, only to be confronted with undeniable proof that it's harmful, corrupt, or even false. The logical response? Leave. The real response? Most people don't. Instead, they dig in deeper. They justify. They twist reality to fit what they want to believe. Because admitting the truth would mean admitting they wasted time, energy, even their entire identity on something that wasn't real. And that's too painful to accept. One of the most extreme examples, the Heaven's Gate cult. This group believed they would ascend to an extraterrestrial afterlife if they followed their leader, Marshall Applewhite. When their predictions failed, when the spaceship never came, did they question their beliefs? Their faith became stronger. Instead of seeing the failure as proof they were wrong, they convinced themselves it was a test of loyalty. And the more they sacrificed, the harder it became to leave. Walking away would mean admitting their entire worldview was a lie. Instead, they doubled down, until in 1997, their belief system led to a mass suicide. But this isn't just about cults. It happens everywhere. The trick is escalation. A manipulator starts small, convincing you to accept a minor contradiction, a little hypocrisy, something that feels wrong, but not wrong enough to walk away. A toxic boss pushes an employee to cover for unethical behavior just once. It feels uncomfortable, but they justify it. I need this job. Then the requests get bigger. Before they realize it, they're trapped in a system they would have once condemned. The same happens in abusive relationships. A partner starts with subtle manipulation, small moments of confusion, of twisting reality just enough to create doubt. Over time, the victim has to rationalize the abuse. They didn't mean it. I must have done something to deserve it. Each justification locks them in deeper. Because if they admit the truth, they'd have to face the fact that they stayed. And it's not just individuals who fall for this trick. Entire societies do. Political and ideological groups use it constantly. When people invest in a movement that later reveals itself to be corrupt or hypocritical, they don't necessarily reject it. Instead, they defend it. They find ways to justify the contradictions. Because admitting they were fooled feels worse than continuing to believe a lie. So how do you break free? First, recognize when your mind is fighting reality. Ask yourself, am I defending this because I believe it? Or because I don't want to admit I was wrong? Second, distance yourself. Emotional attachment clouds judgment. Step back and examine the facts without the weight of your own investment. Cognitive dissonance is a natural part of the human mind. But when amplified by manipulators, it can turn even the most rational person into a prisoner of their own thoughts. The scariest part? The more you fight to convince yourself you're right, the deeper you fall into the trap. The only way out: stop fighting. Start questioning. You yawn when someone else yawns. You laugh when a room erupts in laughter. Your brain isn't just observing, it's mirroring. And while this instinct fuels human connection, it can also be turned against you in ways you'd never suspect. At the core of this manipulation are mirror neurons, specialized brain cells that fire not just when you act, but when you see someone else acting. These neurons are why you flinch when someone gets hurt, or instinctively smile when someone smiles at you. They're the foundation of empathy, bonding, and social influence. But like any powerful tool, they can be weaponized. One of the most infamous examples, the rise of Adolf Hitler. Hitler didn't just give speeches, he mirrored the emotions of his audience. He reflected their fears, frustrations, and hopes back at them. His speeches weren't just words, they were emotional feedback loops, amplified by the crowd's response. He didn't persuade with logic, he made people feel. And once emotion takes over, critical thinking shuts down. But mirroring doesn't need a massive crowd to work. Salespeople, politicians, cult leaders, and con artists use it constantly. A manipulator will subtly copy your posture, tone, and gestures to make you feel at ease. Your brain registers the similarity and assumes, this person is like me, I can trust them. It's why a skilled con artist can make you spill your secrets within minutes of meeting them. They're not just listening, they're reflecting you back to yourself. And this trick goes deeper. Mirroring can manufacture attraction and loyalty. Studies show that when someone subtly mimics your body language, you're more likely to like them, trust them, and agree with them, even if you just met. This is how toxic relationships begin. An abuser may start by mirroring their victim's personality, interests, and values, creating an illusion of perfect compatibility. But once that bond is established, the manipulation shifts. The abuser no longer mirrors, but controls, knowing their victim is too emotionally invested to leave. And this trick isn't just used by individuals. It's built into the systems we interact with every day. Social media algorithms act as digital mirror neurons. Ever notice how platforms feed you content that aligns with your existing beliefs? That's not an accident. The algorithm reflects back what you already think and feel, strengthening your biases and filtering out anything that challenges them. Over time, this creates echo chambers, polarization, and an inability to see other perspectives. So how do you protect yourself? First, recognize when you're being mirrored. If someone copies your mannerisms too closely or reflects your emotions too perfectly, pause and question their intentions. Second, disrupt the pattern. Change your posture, shift topics, or introduce an unexpected idea. A genuine person will flow naturally with the conversation. A manipulator will struggle. They rely on predictability to maintain control. Mirror neurons make us human. They help us connect, learn, and empathize. But in the wrong hands, they become a tool for manipulation, turning your own instincts against you. And the most terrifying part, when done well, you won't even realize it's happening. Most people see empathy as a strength, the foundation of trust, connection, and human kindness. But in the wrong hands, it's a weapon, one that can be twisted, exploited, and used to control. The most dangerous manipulators don't force their victims into submission. They make them feel like they're choosing it. Take Munchausen syndrome by proxy, a disturbing example of weaponized empathy. A caregiver fabricates or induces illness in someone under their care, often a child, convincing them that they're sick. The victim suffers real pain, becomes completely dependent, and never questions the person hurting them because they believe they're being helped. Meanwhile, the abuser enjoys the sympathy, attention, and control that come from being seen as a devoted caretaker. This is how manipulators trap people, using their own compassion against them. The trick is simple. Create a problem that makes someone feel responsible, then present yourself as the only solution. It starts with subtle guilt. Statements like, "You're the only one who understands me. If you leave, I don't know what I'll do." The goal: make the target feel irreplaceable while slowly eroding their autonomy. And if someone resists, that's where compassion fatigue comes in. The manipulator increases their emotional demands, overwhelming their victim until they break down from exhaustion. At some point, giving in feels easier than resisting. And this technique is everywhere. Cults convince followers to abandon their lives for a greater purpose, framing doubt as selfishness. Toxic relationships trap one partner in endless cycles of pity and guilt, forcing them to stay. Scammers pose as victims, sending desperate messages that make you feel like you're the only person who can help. And the scariest part? The more empathetic someone is, the easier they are to manipulate. Because once your compassion becomes an obligation, you stop seeing the trap and start justifying the chains. And now you know. The tricks that hide in plain sight, the silent games that twist the mind, the shadows that wear a smile. But awareness is power. And tonight, you've taken the first step. Not to fear the darkness, but to recognize it. To see clearly where others may be blind. And in that clarity lies your freedom. So now, and let your mind drift. Let the weight of the day melt away. You are safe. You are aware. And you are free. Breathe in deeply. And let go. Good night.